Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your time again. My name is Chad Peterson. I'm currently the chair of the Cass County Commission. I hope you understand how much we appreciate your time. We understand how busy you are. We also understand that as things progress through the legislative session, it'll only get busier. We typically do this individually, the legislative briefings, when we discuss our main topics of concern, but with all the interaction we've had recently over the last 8-9 months of the pandemic and flood and the economic slowdown, we thought it best to get our friends together. Our friends are myself, Mayor Mahoney, and Mayor Dardis. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, and we'll just jump right to the mayors.
Good morning. Thank you for the time this morning. Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo. We're each going to discuss our different issues in our communities, and we welcome you here this morning. I'll have President Bernie Dardis introduce himself first, and then I'll go into the presentation about Fargo.
Good morning, everyone. Merry Christmas. Thank you for sharing your morning with us. We greatly appreciate that. We're in unprecedented times with the fact that we're doing this virtual. And I always look forward to coming out and visiting with the legislative body every year at every session. Well, that's going to change. So that's why we're reaching out to you today to give you some ideas of some of the concerns that we have. But I want one thing perfectly understood from anything that I'm going to say to you today is that we understand, I certainly do understand, that the responsibility of appropriating dollars falls within the legislative body. And so when we're talking about the things that we're talking about, the needs and the things that we have to deal with in our municipalities or in the county, we do this with the utmost respect and maybe a little bit of an education process of some of the things that we're dealing with in our community. Thank you. Again, we're very grateful for your time today.
So put up a slide presentation for Fargo. In Fargo, we'd like to focus, we have it on there, Mike. I'm just waiting for the slides to help explain what we're going to talk about today. The things we want to talk about is of those new State Water Commission funding program for wastewater facilities. As you know, Fargo is a regional area for the communities. West Fargo, Horace, we help Harwood. We have a variety of different communities that come into our wastewater facilities. We feel that in that area, there's some discussion that the state will have in regards to that this coming session that we'd like to explain a bit. The other thing with the increased state infrastructure investment, it really helped us when we revised our assessment policy. So on our special assessment policy, we've taken 18 months to revise that, and I'll explain that a little bit, what good news was for the taxpayer. And we very much support the state bonding program to assist in infrastructure going forward. In the funding program, typically Wastewater Commission has funded water, but not wastewater. In requesting to include wastewater project in the State Water Commission grant funding would be very helpful. For instance, with Horace has to hook up to Fargo with their wastewater, it's a $2.5 million project for them. And oftentimes that is hard for a smaller community to come up with that funding. With the supplementation of an SRF loan and local rate sales tax, oftentimes they'll try to fund it. But it really does help if they're also able to get wastewater grant from the State Water Commission. This would help them reduce their local sales tax issues or special assessments to the community. Other thing that we did is infrastructure investment policy for the City of Fargo. As you know, we are a critical function of the City of Fargo is to keep our streets, our water, and our wastewater, storm sewers all up to date. And we love the partnership model that we have with the state. What we recently did is remodeled our special assessment policy as we found that the burden on the taxpayer was too high. Prairie dog funding is critical to our success and ability to deliver the projects. It very much helps us to minimize special assessments. So a year-long task force submitted 26 recommendations to the City Commission. Of those, 22 of the 26 recommendations were incorporated into our infrastructure policy. We adopted this new policy November 18th, 2019. What the new policy does is utilizes the prairie dog funds to reduce special assessments for paving costs, for single residents, and for MR tiers 1, 2, 3, 4 by 50%. When you get into tier 4, which is more commercial and downtown mixed use, it drops it by 25%. For the single-family residents in MR tiers 1 and 2, which are not directly fronted arterial, it decreases it by 100%. The help of additional funding really helps us get through this. So for instance, I'll go through what we normally do in our CIP, and you can see in special assessments we've got from 2020 and worked our way through that. So if we have the full allocation of the prairie dog fund, what we're able to do is utilize the prairie dog funds, 11 million, 11 million, 12 million, 14 million, to bring down the cost of the special assessments. We used to have a 50-50 cost share with our residents, in which they paid 50% of any redo infrastructure in their neighborhood, and the city paid 50%. We went back to our policy of 2013 and changed that to a 70-30 split. With the Prairie Dog Fund, what we're able to do is move that to an 80-20 split, which is much helpful for the homeowner. Also, the impact of full or partial funding, you can see that when we do water replacement, street reconstruction, it has a huge impact for the city of Fargo. And if we have a CIP in pavement management 17 million, the 8 million from Prairie Dog Funds truly helps us. And if we're able to fund that and more fully, we're able to do more water main replacement and street recon in our community. It has been very helpful for us in our infrastructure in the community. 2020, you can see 23 and 18, that's where it impacts us greatly. If it can continue to full funding the prairie dog or partially funding the prairie dog, it would help us immensely. So we just wanted to do an example for you. A typical home in Fargo, 50-foot lot. We have previously $12,000 in special assessments. With the Prairie Dog Fund, there's $12,000 assessment drops $6,000. If we're unable to use a prairie dog, it drops to $8,000. So you can see there's a core effect of the help of the Prairie Dog Fund to help to decrease the costs of the average taxpayer in the community. Also, in every community, you may do paving, storm, sewer, sanitary different for how it is funded, since you fund part of that out of your utility funding as well. And with the Prairie Dog Fund, again, it continues to decrease the cost for the homeowner. The other thing that we did on our funding for infrastructure specials, there's a fee of 1.5%, which you can assess to the bond of the patient, of the resident gets a loan, and the specials have the interest rate on it. Your communities charge up to a 1.5% fee. We were charging 1%, and we took the recommendation to decrease our charging to 0.75. So we think at this present time that resident and taxpayer get a great benefit from the help from the state. The city also will very much strongly support the new state bonding fund program. And listening to Senator Warner, when he talked about that, it appears to us that that would be critical in our big water projects across the state. Very much would help us to get through a difficult time. And as you know, we're full build right now of the diversion. As the diversion is being built, we are having considerable amount of construction going on. Just want to remind you all that next year's budget that Bernie Dart has presented to us is $225 million. So when people say this thing is barely going, it's really going. There's a lot of stuff going into it, and we very much need the support from the legislative team. Thank you very much for your time, and if there's any questions, what we would do is take them now, and then as each presenter presents, we would take questions at that time. I have my engineering staff stand by if we need to ask them in depth any questions. So maybe if anybody wants to ask a question, identify yourself and ask your question, please. Judy, I see you talking, but I don't hear your mic. Let's try that.
Oh, it says I'm on.
There we go.
Okay, yeah, that's my fault. I realize your system can mute everybody. I wondered if we might be able to have that slide deck forwarded to us, or I would appreciate having that information because I think it's very useful in talking about what you just said. So just asking if we might have that information sent to us.
I'll have Mike send out slides of all of our presentations today, so you'll get them all. I'd be very happy to do that.
Very good, thank you. Thank you.
No questions? It's good to go first because then it's not as vocal. Maybe a second time we'll get more questions when Bernie talks. Very good. I think Mayor Dardis, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Our staff will be forwarding you all my comments as well as our slide deck as well, right after the presentation is done. So you'll be receiving that from the City of West Fargo. Despite the challenges of 2020, the City of West Fargo continued to receive a number of awards and recognitions from national organizations. We share these accolades with yourselves as legislators, Fargo and Cass County, because most often access to jobs, population growth, and a low cost of living are the key factors in these awards. You could not earn these awards without our Metro's dedication to strategic solutions and collaboration across boundaries. These awards underscore the priorities we are going to present to you today, that we ask you for your support and or your consideration as we move into the 2021 session. The City of West Fargo needs support in funding essential infrastructure projects that keep up with the growth of the city and replaces infrastructure in the city's core area. We are looking toward the legislature for new tools, such as new sources of state funding, low interest loans, and the ability to implement various fees. The City of West Fargo's capital improvement plan has planned as follows. For 2020 to 2024, $177.2 million worth of projects. 2025 to 2029, $86.5 million worth of projects. 2030 through 2044, $108.8 million worth of projects. That's $260 million worth of projects over the next 10 years. An average of $7.5 million needing to be spent in the core area of West Fargo each of those years also. Core area of West Fargo requires significant investment in the coming years. Approximately 60% of the roadways need rehabilitation or reconstruction. 63% of the water mains are asbestos cement pipes, which are more likely to break. 22% of the water main system assessed to be at a high risk for failure. 29% of the sanitary sewer system was assessed to be in the two highest risk categories for failure. 19% of the storm sewer system was assessed to be in the two highest risk categories for failure. The City of West Fargo has approved a capital improvement plan that includes the core area needs to address defects in aging infrastructure, reduce inefficiency and redundancy, prioritize lists of projects, analyze funding sources, and create a transparent report to the public. Prairie Dog funding was an excellent step to support the City of West Fargo's infrastructure needs, and we focus the funds on the core area for maximum use. We need assistance to continue to provide the level of service our residents need without impacting affordability for all residents. City uses a multifaceted approach when funding these improvement projects, using collected sales tax, special assessments to the benefiting property owners, and low-interest Bank of North Dakota loans. We need more or expanded tools for funding, such as impact fees or street utility fees. Survey of Special Assessment Community Forum participants in 2019 supported the use of fees over special assessments. Municipal efforts to cover cost of services and projects. Here's what we have done to control and adjust the cost of services and projects. We ask that you continue to support our communities with funding, but also the tools and options to develop custom solutions at a local level. Increase sanitation, sewer, water, forestry, and vector fees to ensure self-sufficient programs, as well as revenue funds for future water and sewer projects. Because of the unprecedented growth in West Fargo, we've been focused on new development. That has put a great burden on our community. What we have had to do is we have had to take a sales tax and reapply it. It's been a difficult decision for our commissioners, but we've had to take a look at all of our various programs and make adjustments to those and raise the cost of doing business. Refinancing of debt. The City of West Fargo requests their bonding financial consultants to review all debt annually to see if there are any savings through refinancing opportunities. Refinancing the bond reduces the interest rate of the bonds, thus reducing the payments needed in the future. Once the bonds are paid, the city will cease to collect the special assessments for the bond. We are one of just a handful of communities in the state of North Dakota that does that. This is a direct savings passed on to the residents included in the assessment district. A recent example is the refinancing of 212D bonds. The refinancing has created a savings of $2 million to the City of West Fargo and to our taxpayers. This will reduce the term of the assessment paid by residents approximately 2 years. Capital improvement plan for future funding. The City of West Fargo has developed a capital improvement plan for the next 45 years. The plan is updated annually. The plan addressed the capital needs of the city based on ongoing need and the condition of infrastructure assessment. Projects in the plan include a cost estimate and timing the projects will occur. With projects that are developed, we are able to develop a financial plan on funding the projects. This financial planning includes source of funds, allowing the city to proactively secure grants, allocate current capital funds like sales tax, develop new funding sources, or identify future unmet funding needs. With the associated financial plan, the city is able to schedule projects closer to when they are needed or at a later time if required. The city maintains a strong financial position with a current bond rating of A1. The strong rating provides for lower interest rates when the City of West Fargo bonds sell. The lower the interest rate when a bond is sold, the lower the interest amount paid by our residents. The positive bonding rating remains by holding strong cash reserves, proactive capital improvement planning, aggressive economic development, and increasing of rates when necessary to cover costs. The strong financial position allows the city to continue to function as needed during the difficult economic times like the current year. The city experienced reduction of revenues from the state and other sources. The reserves of the city provided positive cash flow, allowing the leadership to make positive economical adjustments to spending, minimizing the impact of COVID. Construction project funding approach. Using a multifaceted approach to fund projects. The example is the North Cheyenne Street Corridor reconstruction projects. Project includes replacing aging infrastructure and streetscaping to strengthen the area's destination appeal. The project is estimated to cost $10.45 million. Funding plan includes 6 different sources: $1.8 million in capital improvement sales tax, $1.2 million in economic development sales tax, $2.2 million in water and sewer utility fee revenues, $2.377 million in the North Dakota Department of Transportation grant, $1.8 million in special assessments, and $1 million in prairie dog funding. And we thank you for that. The Workforce Academy is also a priority for the City of West Fargo. The job market plays a critical role in the success of our community. We support the Workforce Academy and ask that you continue to support it as well. West Fargo School District is a major contributor to the state's future workforce with students who have demonstrated a desire to pursue career and technical education. More than 4,000 career and technical education class sessions held in 2018 and 2019 school year. Workforce shortages limited growth, and economic development opportunities are needed. Dire need for technical skills in healthcare, welding technology, mechanical skills, and more. The Career Workforce Academy merges area businesses with skilled local employees who benefit from a quality, cost-effective education. In conclusion, we will be following up with these slides and remarks for additional support of our documents. Public safety is also a major concern in funding our West Fargo Police Department and Fire Department. The number of increased calls in a growing community like ours are amazing. We are also the second largest school district in the state of North Dakota. We continue to have many families of childbearing age move to our community. The important legislative issues for the legislature are include per pupil payments, increase in educator pay, developing a mastery graduation pathway, and enhancing on-time funding. I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I stand to answer them. Thank you.
Mike, can we put up the people in case somebody has a question? Okay. Any questions from group?
Yes, I've got a question. This is Austin Shower over in West Fargo. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
You know, I don't mean to be Captain Obvious here, but these are not normal times. And I think we're all aware of the threats looming against the state, the change in the White House, the lack of support for fossil fuels. Bonding is not supported by Chet Pollard. We know that. That's going to be a tough hurdle. We're not going to get any tax increases. That will not happen. And we still have COVID out there. So, you know, Mayor Dardis, I was interested in your low interest loans, implement fees, the custom solutions, reapplying the sales tax, and then your reserves. I think we're all in a situation where if we get what we got last session, we're probably in a good situation. But that may not happen. So my question to the city leaders is, do you have plan B ready to go? Do you have enough reserves? I mean, if there are significant cutbacks, can you deal with that?
West Fargo is well positioned with its cash reserves. Yes, Representative Shower. And thank you for the question. You make a great point. In my conversations with legislators across the state, obviously we're all well aware of what the economic times are, the amount of oil production and the lower price for oil. The one issue that the community and the public continues to talk about, as do you as legislators, is the legacy fund earnings. So when we speak about the possibility of low interest loans or revolving fund loans and that type of thing from the Bank of North Dakota, obviously you folks are charged with the responsibility and figuring out what the appropriated dollars are. And we respect that process. But those funds that are available of earnings, and obviously you as legislators will determine what percentage of those earnings that you might reinvest. Our suggestion is that we reinvest it in infrastructure. Infrastructure is for improvements for the taxpayers as well as creating jobs. So again, we respect the situation that we're in financially across the state of North Dakota. But there are some other things. You know, the legislature has capped what we can do for utility fees and for, you know, street projects and things like that. I realize that when this, a number of sessions back, when you folks made a move to help with property taxes and then to take over social services, that was a great thing. But there are still responsible elected officials that understand what the needs are of their communities, and we need some latitude, and that's respectfully what I'm asking for. Thank you, Representative Shower.
I think that's a great question that you ask. Here's kind of the odd things about COVID life. is that our permits are 714 million right now in our community. So in spite of all the things going on, we've had tremendous growth within the community. As you know, Amazon came into town as well. That's a $120 million project. Our rent assistance to people who are having trouble with COVID is 1.5 million. We have 1,500 families that are affected by that, and we appreciate the state helping us in the COVID funding. When the state did COVID funding for our police officers, that was worth 14 million to the city of Fargo. So initially when we hit COVID, we did a CIP readjustment, dropped $10 million off of what our plans were for this year and planned for a bad year. And what has happened is with the turnaround in the capital growth and things that are happening in the community, we have a good balance of what we can go forward on. Mayor Furness years ago had requested a reserve of 25% for the city of Fargo, so we do have reserves just like West Fargo. And if tough times come, yes, we can get through that. But just the bonding question is we refinanced our bonding and we got a rate of 1.88. So if there's ever a time to bond, this is the time to bond for your big infrastructure projects. Sooner we can get some of the things done, the better it is for all of us. So we will work with the state and appreciate all you do for us and what you might be able to give us, but oftentimes we'll readjust our budgets according to what the finances we have available. Chad Peterson, your comment?
I'm going to touch on that a little bit as my fifth slide, but essentially we're in the same boat our neighbors are. We're well capitalized to do what we need to do. The problem is the longer we delay infrastructure, the more it's going to cost. So I think we can manage our way through a year, maybe two. Obviously, we reduce, and again, I'll touch this in my fifth slide, but we'll reduce our 5-year plan. We'll start pushing projects back. And I know we have some people in construction on our phone call, and you know what that means. The more degraded a road gets, the more it costs to upgrade. So I think having 10%, roughly 10% of the bridges in the entire state of North Dakota exist in Cass County, delaying things is not ideal. It's not good. I don't think we're in a situation where we'll have to be removing bridges that won't be replaced. But we're not too far off. If this situation continues into perpetuity, Cass will have to adjust accordingly, and I think we're pretty well capitalized as well as we need to be regarding taxes. I'm struggling asking for more money from my neighbors, but if we have to accomplish a mission, we have to accomplish it. If there's no help in terms of revenue from the state, it means we'll have to raise taxes.
Any other questions? Chad Peterson, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you for all of you participating in the phone call. I'm going to touch on 5 different areas. 1, social services. 2, corrections. 3rd, emergency services. 4, workforce academy. And then 5th, infrastructure. So with that, social services, 3 points here. First of all, a big thank you. And maybe let me back up one slide. Not this slide, but let me back up thematically. Understand that I'm grateful for what you've done, not just in social services, but all the things that you do for us. And know that we need you as advocates. Cass County isn't better than anyone else. We're bigger. Bigger means different scale. Bigger means different complexity. Bigger means a lot more problems that many of the other 52 counties don't have to deal with. And we need you as advocates. I need your help. I need you to advocate for the things that a lot of counties aren't going to encounter, a lot of things that other counties will never see. Things like this in social services. Again, thank you for this. It was a massive reduction in property tax, but you'll know that there's a couple items, in fact, that aren't going to be addressed directly by the bill that was put forward a couple sessions ago. So first is indirect costs. Things like photocopiers, telephones, the basic implementation, the widgets you need to do your job. We're not like the other counties. We're roughly 20+% of the population, but we're about 30% of the overall state caseload. Again, 20% of the population, 30% of the caseload. That means when it comes to other counties talking about reimbursements for phones and copiers, well, they're communal in the other courthouses. In Cass, they're not. We're dedicated. We have specialization within each of our departments, child protection, economic assistance. Other counties are the jack of all trades. They have to do everything. Each social worker has to do any number of activities. In Cass, we're not like that. We have specialization. So with indirect costs, it's easy for us to tell you and tell our neighbors what it costs for the phones, the copiers, all the things it takes. So I understand in principle why this was a thing, why this became a thing for other counties, but in our particular case, it's not the best. And you'll see on our slides, it's $250,000, and I think that number might actually be higher than that if we really dug into the nuts and bolts of this. So right now, direct funding through our general fund dollars is $250,000 at a minimum to pay for the things that it takes to do our job. What you can do to help that, I don't know, because again, you're gonna advocate for something that no one else, maybe like a Grand Forks County, a Ward, and a Burley may have similar situations where they've got the scale that we do. But again, I'd like you to advocate for, if you could, reimbursement of those dollars or something maybe different in terms of the formalization of it. Item 2, this is, back up one slide, sorry, item 2 on social services. Legal services, again, we are of scale where no one else is. With that, we tied our state's attorney's office directly to social services. As you can see from the slide, that's going to cost us roughly $750,000. Why is that? Well, we have more foster care issues here in town. We have a lot more economic assistance things that lead to potential litigation. And it's been determined by our state's attorney's office that it's best to dedicate certain attorneys to these things because, again, specialization. It takes a lot of understanding and skill to know what you can do in a court regarding the seizure of one's child. And we should have that specialization. We should have perfection in the courtroom. The problem is that a lot of the other counties, again, the other 52, I think Grand Forks County does have legal services attached, but I'm not aware of anyone else that does. So again, we can allocate a dollar figure towards legal services, towards social services. You understood that last session, and you reimbursed us to 2018 levels. That level is about $365,000, I believe, but with increases in wages and step COLA, as well as new hires, we are going to have to increase that cost based on the volume we see in the courtroom up to $750,000 this coming year. That's a struggle for us. Because again, I can purposefully and easily show you these attorneys only work on social services activities. So again, if you can advocate for us in any which way or form to either at the very least continue what you've done in the past or even better, get us in there, help us tell our story and educate and explain as to how this is a unique circumstance, and that would be incredible if you could somehow get us additional funding for that. Thirdly, under social services, caseloads under COVID, surprisingly, in Cass County have not increased due to COVID. They've increased due to scale. We grow every year. 3,000 to 5,000 people move to Cass, as you're well aware of. That's not stopped, nor will it stop in the near future. We've become a place of synergy. The population will continue to grow into perpetuity, I hope anyway. I love this community. I think growth is good. But with that comes nuance. With that comes struggle and issues and strife. And as always, our caseloads have increased. Again, not due necessarily to COVID, but they've increased. We appreciate you could somehow advocate for us in terms of increasing staffing. And I know there's some discussions regarding repurposing people. By that I mean our friends in the smaller counties that may not be busy can do an economic assistance case, and what they can do is help us out in Cass County as we delegate, be it the internet, be it via phone call, Teams meetings, and help us process cases so we can balance out the caseload from county to county. But the reality is that's not going to happen tomorrow. That's a long-term goal, and it's a good goal, by the way. I think we have good leadership in Bismarck, but between then and now, we still need more bodies to do the work because we can't close our annex, which is where our social services department is. So we can't close our courthouse. We can't say no. If someone shows up, we have to serve them. And the federal government, as some of you know anyway, the federal government has parameters on timeline. So we have to respond in a certain period of time. And especially if you're going for food or heating or lighting assistance, it's not ideal to have us wait for 2 or 3 months to process your case. So it's logical those timelines exist. But again, anything you can do to advocate for us on those 3 aspects in social services, I would be incredibly grateful. Second slide, please. Corrections. A couple things here. First, and I think some of you are aware, we've been talking, those of you that called me regarding this, but currently right now, as I believe 3 sessions ago, within the DOC bill for funding, there was a line that was tucked in ever so gently that allowed the corrections friends we have in Bismarck to refuse their customers. We knew that was a concern back then because if it wasn't a concern, they never would have put it in the bill, but it's in the bill and it got through. So this allowed them to do what they're doing right now. Right now, DOCR is refusing inmates. Not all of them, but some of them. And what that does is that puts inmates that aren't necessarily built for a jail right? So we have jails and prisons. Prisons are exponentially different. They're built for a more severe clientele base. We're not built for that locally, nor should we be, frankly. But the issue now is that not just because of COVID, this is pre-COVID too, the state has refused certain inmates, and they're getting better, but that thing still exists. And what we're asking for through the Sheriff's Association is that you legislate our friends in the DOCR to have at least a timeline of when they must accept them, because again, this is the good thing about talking to you, our local Cass County team, is everything that we're talking about affects your pocketbook directly. It affects you, me, our neighbors, instantaneously and directly. So if we're having to house inmates at a cost of roughly $100-ish a day, and you can debate whether the number is accurate or not, I think it's actually more than that, but $100 a day, that's on us housing state inmates. And we are talking about negotiating with them regarding a reimbursement on an individual case-by-case basis, meaning county by county. But still, we don't have the capacity to hold state inmates, and I don't think that we should have to have that capacity. Item 2 under this is administrative rules, and that's not on the slide, but as you well know, sometimes our friends in our bureaucracies just make decisions. And when those decisions happen, they often don't ask for input from the locale. So we're stuck with dealing with DOCR regulations that affect us, not just Cass, but any county that has a jail. And it's not that they're arbitrary decisions, but sometimes we would like a little bit more input. And I think the DOCR under new leadership has been more receptive of that. But anything you can do to help encourage the DOC to communicate with our sheriffs, to communicate with counties in terms of when they make administrative rules would be helpful. And obviously, from your perspective, selfishly, I think, I would struggle with someone just making a rule and having me come back 2 years later and having to deal with that rule. So it kind of puts you in a bit of an awkward position too. So thank you with that. Item 3. Sorry, side 3, emergency services. A couple of years ago, Cass County electorate chose to put an emergency services or 911 system on property tax. I struggle with that. That accounts for 5 mills, roughly 10% of the property taxes you're gonna see on what Mike My Pleasure calls your Christmas card that you just received in the mail, your property tax bill, is this project. It's emergency radio. And I'm gonna try to gloss over this as quickly as I can because this can get really muddy really quick. But essentially what it is, it's towers and communications equipment for all our first responders and our friends within the law enforcement community. Our equipment was getting old and expiring. This is not an exaggeration, we were buying equipment off eBay and reserving it in case our equipment broke. So once it did reach the widget's end of useful life, we could replace it with another widget we got online. It's crazy to say that out loud, but that's what it was. So we waited for the state to react, knowing full well, I think full well, this should be a holistic solution so that someone in Cass County can talk to someone in Ward, someone in Cass County can talk to someone in McKinsey, in Slope. It's a better solution. For a situation like we had with DAPL, again, I don't know how much people know about this, but when we were out in DAPL, we had to use our friends in the Highway Patrol and the Guard for communications because we couldn't talk to our friends in Morton. We'd swing out with Fargo PD, West Fargo PD, and Cass County deputies, and we couldn't talk to each other. Right now, the state of Minnesota, if you're in Moorhead, you can speak to someone on the far eastern side of Wisconsin simply by turning to a different station. That's our mission, I think. And again, with that, we couldn't wait. So we spent $14.3 million of our money to get this situation resolved. We're knowing that our friends in the state out in Bismarck, I think you've allocated, I want to say it's like $40 or $60 million so far. The budget rough allocation is $220 million plus or minus, but I think that number's low, by the way. So there's that dialogue we can have at a different date, but long story short, other counties, I always pick on Griggs because I have friends in Griggs. Griggs will never be able to afford the infrastructure improvements. Slope County, population of 780 people, will never be able to afford it. They've got, I think, 3 or 4 towers coming in. Each tower is roughly $1.2 million. Slope County will never be able to capitalize this project. And our friends in Slope County deserve the same protection we have here in Cass. Not just because, again, we could find ourselves out there, but because they're citizens too. We just all deserve protection when we call 911. And I think the struggle here is that we're paying $14.3 million of property taxes, while at the same time we're going to be looking at allocations to our other 52 counties that won't be the same. So when it comes time to find these additional dollars and you appropriate them accordingly, as you should, please advocate for reimbursement of what is your dollars too, because we need to do these things and we can't wait. I've talked enough about that. So thank you for your advocacy there. Next slide, please. As Mayor Dardis touched on, the Career Workforce Academy, we support it. I struggled with it. As many of you know, you attended the meetings I spoke at, but we needed to do something, and we couldn't wait for someone else to react, much like our emergency services I just talked about before. It's a needful thing. I had hoped the schools would do it. They didn't want to. So we took it upon ourselves, along with our partners in Fargo and West Fargo, to accomplish the mission we think the education system should have taken care of. Is what it is. We got the mission accomplished, but here's the deal. As you're aware, within, I believe, Senator Wardner's bill, I'm not sure, I think it crept into the governor's budget as well, between $50 and $60 million. And those aren't just for Fargo, right? That's for Fargo, Grand Forks, Minot, Bismarck, in addition, I think, in Bismarck, and possibly another academy in Dickinson. Again, all needful things. These are jobs we need. And it's not just, more wood shops. We need more saws and we need more welders. These are the voids that aren't being taken care of right now. Things like plumbing, things like HVAC, things like drone programming technology, networking, and data. The curriculum as it's developed will be an incredible thing. It could be revolutionary. It's the topics that aren't taught and couldn't be taught, even within the scale we have in West Fargo, one of, if not the biggest school district we have soon in the state, followed by Fargo, and if not 1 and 2, 2 and 1. They don't have the critical mass to take care of these either, but combined we do. Combined, the good we can do with this project is incredible. And it's been a success everywhere else it's been tried. But with that, knowing full well here, we funded it locally. And as these dollars are allocated, whether it's this session or next, I hope this, we hope that you advocate for us in terms of reimbursement for the costs that we've had, and additional, as you can see, phase 2 of what this thing may become. I could see it become a hub of education for the region. I'd love to see our friends from down south in Richland or up north in Trail commuting to the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo area to get education. I mean, what a boon that would be for them as well. It could be an incredible thing. So again, as the state reimburses others or funds others, I wish, I hope, I pray that you advocate for reimbursement for us as well. Last slide, please. I think this horse has been beaten, but I will pound it one more time. Infrastructure. As you're well aware, the way the buckets work within the Prairie Dog funding, I think State Water Commission is roughly $30, $35 a barrel. We're comfortably at the high 40s. I think we're even 50 on Brent right now in terms of oil costs. So hopefully the projections only get better. Hopefully the projections stabilize. But we do know that this session is not going to be as easy. It never is easy, I suppose, but not as easy in a different way in terms of lack of funding. Counties will be left short. We believe the city buckets will be full, at least to some degree, and there may be some spillover into counties, but know full well, as we discussed before on your prior question, is that the funding of county roads is as important as anyone. I testified for Surge Bills 1 and 2 because our friends out west, as oil was developed, needed that help. We invested hundreds of millions of dollars out west getting their infrastructure up to what it should have been and what it needs to be. But in the same breath, this is a call I used with one of your partners on a phone call yesterday, the Hub City funding. I say that the Fargo, I always count my friends in Moorhead and Clay too, the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo area, we're pretty hubby. We kind of hub along too. And if you saw my testimony in my first surge bill, my good friend Commissioner Scott Wagner said it perfectly. He said, Cass County also has oil wells. We just have them a little bit smaller. They're called cash registers. And our oil wells chug. Our sales tax is up roughly 10% this year, even with the plague. So while our friends out west are commodity dependent, if we're concerned about maintaining the hubbiness of our hub cities, I pray, again, that you advocate for additional funds, not only for my friends in Fargo and West Fargo, smaller towns like Castleton and Kindred, but all the interconnectivity between the two. And with that, I sincerely thank you for your time. I sincerely hope you appreciate how much we appreciate your time and your advocacy. And if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. I sit as the vice president of the County Commissioner Association, and if I do my job well enough, I'll be the president. We'll see if they like me. Some do, some don't. Some don't like my beard, some don't like the fact I'm bald, don't like my red shirt, whatever it is. But whatever I can do to help you, please, gosh, ask me. I want to be available. I know this is a tougher year in terms of communications, but I'm around. I'm always around. Again, one of you just called me last night, and that's awesome. Thank you for that. Whatever I can do to advocate, whatever I can do to help, whatever I can do to inform, please let me know. Thank you much.
Thank you, Chad. Any questions, legislative team?
Yes, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, this is Mark Weber here. Chad, I've got a question for you. Well, I'll make this as a general statement too. According to the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute, they put out an estimate that about $9 billion are going to be needed over the next 20 years to fund local bridges and roads, just to get it up to bring it up to the standards. So obviously, you know, from the township level, this is a serious problem. My question to you: does the State Water Commission, do they provide some cost share to the county for bridges that go across legal drains? And if they do, is there any danger that we're losing some of that funding?
I'm not aware, unless it's specifically impacted in terms of flow, then they'd be required to by state law. But broadly speaking, no, unless we go in for a major modification of some kind, no. And I think, and again, I'm going to speak sort of generically here. It would take a situation or a scenario where, for whatever reason, like the diversion, perfect example, a major modification to a road pathway, within that project, that number has to be included in the fiscal note, if that makes sense. So it can't be ignored. It can't be simply saying, in my understanding, I don't think I'm wrong, but my understanding is they say, I'm going to modify a waterway. You folks along the way figure out what you're going to do. Godspeed. Well, they can't do that. They have to say, well, the impacts along that waterway have to be accounted for within that fiscal note. So it should be taken care of within that project. I'm not aware of a circumstance where it's not. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but I'd be hard-pressed to think that's a reality. I hope it's not anyway.
Yeah, and then Chad, just one more follow-up question. You said that the county average highway construction budget is 12 to 14 million.
Yes, sir.
Now, is that strictly on county roads, or does that include anything for township roads, or is that strictly allocated for county?
100% county, and we could have a township dialogue. So I make it a point. All of our county commissioners do a good job in Cass, and I think they do it throughout the state, attending township officers meetings and advocating as we can. I know the counties do advocate for townships because we have, again, I'll use the word critical mass or term critical mass. We have the critical mass to advocate for them. So we've always locked ourselves, and I think League of Cities too. We've always had a good working relationship with League of Cities, advocating for all of our neighbors. So townships are a different beast because, again, the scale there is so much smaller, but roads still cost as much for a township as they do for a county, even though you've got a smaller capacity to generate revenue. How you want to address that, I don't know, because again, if counties are getting little to nothing, and that's the way it seems, I don't know what is going to be left over for townships, if anything. It's not good news, you know, and you probably know better than I do, but I don't know what to tell you. It's not good.
Thank you, Senator. We did have Senator Warner talk about the townships and road reconstruction as part of his bonding bill, because it appears that a lot of townships do not have the capital to do those things. So we can send anything in that regards to you. Our next presenter is going to be Joel Paulson's going to talk about the Diversion Authority, and I know he's talked to many of you about this already, so I've asked him to keep his remarks brief just to give you an idea of what we're looking for in the legislative session. Joel? We've got you. Are you ready? Can you put the slideshow up? We could go through it. So we're looking for permanent flood protection, as you know, in our community. The good news this year is we did have a settlement with the Upstream Coalition. Basically, resolves our legal challenges For the legislative team, what this really does is just takes away any legal issues as we go forward. It's a tremendous boost to the project in the sense that you no longer have legal challenges that will slow it down. We can predict our schedule now and go forward with our schedule. Unfortunately, on our P3, we won't have our bidding back until crossover, and that will set a little bit of difficulty, but we still will be proceeding as we would plan. Construction is underway. The diversion inlet and control structures, a lot of work has been done there, and surprisingly, the wild rice control structure also has had a great amount of work done. For those who've always helped us in in-town flood protection, we're near complete. We have about $30 million to $40 million left in that regards, and we're getting there. There's only 6 homes now that we need to buy out to complete our flood protection throughout the community. We did receive the WIFIA funds. You may have heard about that, and the WIFIA fund is $569 million, and the WIFIA loan allows us to have an option as far as where we get our loan and money, and anticipate that that will be bid out soon, so we'll be able to lock in on low interest loan money. The CLOMAR was finally done, and what the FEMA CLOMAR does is you are able to define the area of staging, who gets affected and who doesn't. So on the map, if you look at the light green, what that defines is all the farmers and people that will be affected by the project. And with that FEMA CLOMAR, then that's when we can go out to somebody and say, yes, your farm is affected, and no, it is not affected, but it's a definitive conditional letter, so we know where the effects of the project might be. North Dakota has given us a permit issued and approved our mitigation plan, and the mitigation plan, it's welcome any of you want to read it, but it tells you how we handle mitigation throughout the area. This is the inlet structure and control structure. We can't tell you how many tons of concrete go into it, but this is where the water will stage behind, and in the areas in the center area will be the gates that go up and down. On each side you're seeing walls of concrete which will hold things back. Many of the legislative team was able to see this fall, and you can see we're making tremendous progress. This is the wild rice control structure, and as you can see, that also has had a tremendous amount of work done on it, and they will continue to fix this up as well, to have a control structure in this area. Land acquisitions has gone fairly well. There's impacted areas of 1,000, and we are up to 419 secured so far. We, if you see the map, what you're seeing is the green is that we have things going and worked out with the people. Many of the blue areas are in negotiations. We have had to do eminent domain in some of these areas, and the county has worked with us that as well. And we continue to try to work with people even if they are going into eminent domain. Last resort is what we call it. And those people, now that we've got a settlement with the upstream people and it looks like the project is going forward, it appears that more people are sitting down and talking to us in a more better fashion and seem to be negotiating better. P3 schedule is on track. The RFP draft was done November 13th. They have the final release will be in January 15th. The technical proposals will be joined February 26th, but the financial proposal will not be done until March 26th. That is when we'll know the firm cost. It's an estimated cost of $1.2 billion, but the firm cost will be in at that time. Mayor Dardis is going to be heading up our finance committee, and he will be talking to you at the time we get the final proposals to you, and we will have, that's going to be a hard cost. So when the P3 is bid, there's no inflation in there. It's one bid. That's what the cost is. Selection of the P3 developer will be in April, and P3 is moving along. Construction starts fall of 21. That's why the cost will go up in 21. So as you can see, our anticipated P3 contract, there's what they call a certain payment schedule that we have to do. That may change a bit, but roughly you can see it goes in chunks of $200 million, $100 million, $225 million, $100 million, and $138 million. And we thank the state for the money that we've had so far, but we will continue to work with you on how the money would be utilized as we go forward. So in the funding overview, it's important for all of us to remember that the local costs are $1 billion. The North Dakota cost asking the state for is $870 million. And the federal cost is 750 in investment, but they do inflation, so by the time the project's done, they'll have 900 million into the project. So I think you all know that that's where we're sitting, and people have been state sales tax right now in the city is 1.8%, and the project is designed for 1.5%. So we are still on task for our financial model and should do well. Federal cost construction, as you see, that goes up to 900 million, and they will do it in chunks. They've done 198 million to date, and Senator Hoeven is working on a $225 million ask this time from the Corps. State funding, consistent request, we will be asking for go up another 120 million in your intent. You're at 750 right now. We believe that the cost will probably come in around 120 million more. But again, Bernie Dardis will share with you the final costs when we get them. And as we get closer and closer to next year, we should firm up most of our cost and mitigation and different issues that we have. The current 2021 legislative request is 66.5. We've had a request from the Water Commission, and you gave us 44 million this last time, and we backed off on some of the money just to help the state with its different intents throughout the state. The last part of the money that will come in will be used for property acquisition, P3 procurement, in-town, and administrative costs. So the state cost share request will be based off the final P3 bids and estimated in March 21. The increased total intent would be, as we presently sit, 870. The legislative team is committed to 750. We do thank you at this point. We've already got $414 million appropriated, and there's 455 remaining. Both Governor Burgum and Senator Warner responding proposals under consideration would offer benefits to our long-term funding needs and decrease the amount of burden that's put on the locals. Joel Paulson's contact information is here, and I will have this sent out to all of you so you can have this in your bailiwick. Do I have any questions? And again, I think many of you have seen this presentation, but I will have Joel be available for questions if any of you have. Any questions? Next now, do we have Mary Meridian on? Yes?
Yes, can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, we can. Now, Mary's going to explain to you the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, and we are very pleased. Our permits are ready. We're ready to get into the ground, and we will be into the ground next spring. Right, Mary?
Correct, even sooner than that. All right, first of all, I want to thank the leaders of Fargo, West Fargo, and Cass County for including the Red River Valley Water Supply Project in this discussion, and thank you to legislators for participating today. Many of you already know about the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, so I'm going to give a short refresher on the project and update you where we are today. Garrison Diversion Conservancy District, who I work for, represents the state of North Dakota in this project, and our partner is Lake Agassiz Water Authority, and they represent the local water systems. And Mayor Tim Mahoney is actually the chairman of Lake Agassiz Water Authority. Next slide, please. We live in North Dakota, and we know that weather can change in a second. So do weather patterns. But yet we don't know when the next long-term drought will hit. But we do know that existing water supplies will be inadequate during a drought, and climatologists predict that a 1930s type drought will likely repeat again by 2050. And that will have an estimated economic impact of $28 billion. This slide shows where we've gone in 1 year in the state. Last December, the state was basically wet, and now most of the state is either in a moderate or severe or extreme drought, with the Red River Valley being abnormally dry. Next slide. The Red River, which is this region's primary water source, is unpredictable. This is a graph showing 2011 to 2012. In the summer of 2011, there was the 4th largest flood on the Red River. And a little more than a year later, October of 2012, there was extremely dry conditions. The river went from flowing at 45,000 cubic feet per second to just 50 cubic feet per second. Next slide. And this is really important because the metro area has seen tremendous growth and continues to grow. In the 1930s, when the Red River went dry, there were only about 36,000 residents living in the metro area. Now there's over 170,000 residents relying on the Red River for their drinking water supply. Next slide. The regional impacts during a 1930s type drought in Fargo and West Fargo. Today, if we were to suffer that type of a drought, you'd need roughly 1,500 truckloads of water daily just to meet the basic indoor water needs. That's a truck arriving every minute. If we fast forward to 2075 with projected population increases, that's 4,900 truckloads every day daily, and that's a truckload arriving every 20 seconds. That's just not realistic. Next slide. We've done quite a bit of modeling for this project, and the main point of this graph is all the black that you see. That is the water demand shortages for the Fargo area in a 1930s style drought. And that shows that there is a shortage every single year of that drought. Next slide. We've done updated modeling efforts. We've always considered that this project would be needed during a 1930s type drought. That's why you hear us talk about that, because it's our major drought of record. But our updated modeling efforts actually show, with the population growth, that every decade from the 1950s up to 2000, this project would have needed to operate. And that's not a picture of the Red River during the 30s. That's actually the Red River in 1988. Next slide. Gerald Richardson, who is the director of the North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network, NDON, he says that we live in this highly dynamic, changing climate. In 1975, the Red River went from its highest point ever in the summer, and the next year it was relatively dry. And he says that's the reality of where we live. We have changing weather conditions and changing river conditions. Next slide. Now, this project, it is $1.2 billion. It is a massive project that is much needed. The need for this project is real. Next slide. Now, I'll kind of get into an update of where we currently are with this project. I want to thank legislators for their past support of this project, including funding last session. Last session in Senate Bill 2020, which is the State Water Commission's funding bill, there was $43 million of intent for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. The bill also included a lot of conditions that the Red River Valley Water Supply Project needed to meet. I'm happy to state that we have met all of those conditions, including very critical permits. We have all of our state and federal permits needed to move this project forward. And by completing all of those conditions, we were allowed access to funding. The state engineer, State Water Commission, and the legislative budget section actually approved that we've met all of those conditions. And then recently, at the October and December meeting, the State Water Commission has awarded $16.4 million to keep this project moving forward. Next slide. And we have been talking a lot about early out construction, getting this project moving instead of just design of the project, actually starting construction. And we have three features that we've always talked about that we've wanted to keep going. And we have actually awarded a bid on the Missouri River Intake Pumping Station wet well. That's a lot of words, but we have awarded the bid for the wet well. It's nearly a $5 million bid. And this will actually start construction this January. It's very critical to keep this project moving forward, especially with this component of it. We have federal permits that we are relying on that will actually expire in March of 2022. Next slide, please. And the other two parts of our early out strategy is to do some of the transmission pipeline. We're going to do roughly a mile of construction of the transmission pipeline. This is a 72-inch pipeline, and that will occur roughly south of Carrington. And then also is our discharge structure on the Cheyenne River. And we hope to let those bids and award those bids in late January or February. Next slide. So moving forward, we actually are ready to have bid or are in the process of preparing the bids for our early out construction. And with the funding that we've also received this biennium, we're working on design and we'll be actually shovel ready for over $150 million in construction. Next slide. But that brings us to the 2021-23 legislative ask for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. We have officially requested $50 million. This will be in the State Water Commission's Water Development Plan. And I'll state the bonding has been talked about earlier, so I won't go that far into it, but Garrison Diversion and Lake Agassiz fully support Senator Wardner's bonding proposal and also what's included in the governor's plan. The Resources Trust Fund is the only source of funding right now for water projects, and right now you have 3 massive water projects going on in the state at one time. It's unprecedented. So if we could get bonding to help free up some of the funding in the Resources Trust Fund so that funding could be used for smaller, just as important projects, that would be much appreciated. One of the things with this project that's also just as important is to have a long-term low-interest loan from the state, and that's to keep the project affordable for the users, for the local water systems. We need predictable financing for all users. We have been modeling something such as a 40-year 2% loan. Anything that would be based on WIFIA would be much appreciated. So that is really one of the other critical items for this project. If we receive $50 million from the state, that means there's $16.7 million that the locals, at a 75% cost share, 25% local, the locals would have to come up with $16.7 million. And to do that, we really do need a long-term low interest loan. And we continue to ask for legislative support to fund this project. Next slide, please. This is a slide of what we would spend the $50 million from the state plus the $16 million from the locals would be $66 million. We would continue that critical component of the Missouri River intake. We would be constructing the river screens and tunnels. I'll state that that will actually probably be bid ready in February or March. And then we'll continue the main pipeline design and construction. We could probably do another 5 miles of construction. Both of those two constructions are very important to deal with the permits that we have from the Corps of Engineers, or you've probably heard of Waters of the U.S. Any changes in Waters of the U.S. could be harmful for the project. So we really need to keep this project moving forward. Next slide. And again, I want to thank you for allowing us to be part of this discussion today, and we look forward to your continued support.
Thank you, Mary. Great presentation. Very much appreciate that. We're getting towards the end here, but we do have time for some questions. There's some people would ask some questions. Especially, we'd like you to stress Bernie Dardis on any tough questions so that he can see if he's prepared for these questions.
Senator Sarbog, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Senator.
I want to direct this to Mary, and the reason is there's quite a few newer legislators that haven't been in part of this process for quite a while. And this is relevant to all of us in the East. But I think you need to just explain a little, unless Mayor Mahoney wants to, why there's no federal dollars involved with this Red River water supply. I mean, that's a purposeful thing done by the state and done by your program. But I think those that haven't been around really need to understand, because it is a stretch. That's why bonding's critical and all that. But I just think if you could use an update why we're trying to do this without federal help.
Mary, I'll have
Mayor
you
Mahoney?
respond to that, yes.
Okay, thank you, Senator Servag. That is a great point to point out. I have been working for Garrison Diversion since 2003, and I have started working on this project. When I started working on the project, we were in the middle of starting a environmental impact statement with the federal government, who was the Bureau of Reclamation. And we've always wanted to get water out of the McCluskey Canal and use those federal facilities. In 2009, an environmental impact statement was released. There was a needs and options report released as well. It showed that the project is really needed. There was a preferred alternative chosen, but we never received what's called a record of decision. You can't move forward with a federal project without a record of decision. So that happened in 2009. And for the next probably 5 or 6 years, along with Fargo, the state of North Dakota, Garrison Diversion, and many, we worked really hard to have the federal government allow us to have a record of decision, and that never happened. So through the tremendous efforts of trying to get that to happen, and it didn't, the state and Fargo and Garrison Diversion had all decided, and Lake Agassiz Water Authority, that this is a really critical project and is needed. It needs to move forward as a state and local project. So that's the reason that we don't have any federal funding involved in our project, that it is all a state and local project, and shows the real need for that bonding.
Yet at the same time, we are asking to be allowed to pull water out of the McCluskey Canal as well as an alternative. So we are pursuing that at this time. But to Senator Sarvag's question, yes, it's not a federal project. Any other questions? Well, are you gentlemen ready for your closing arguments or statements? Chad, I'll have you go first.
Hey, thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Again, well, I'll steal a word from my governor, gratitude. Understand how much we appreciate. My dad was a senator for years out of District 44 in North Fargo, and I personally, as a youth, realized the sacrifices he had to make. And please note that I understand you guys taking a 4-month vacation every other year is a big deal, plus the subcommittee meetings in between. The sacrifices you give, the time you give, probably goes underappreciated by most, if not all. And you need to be thanked for that. So I'm grateful for your terms. I'm grateful for your time. And again, if there's anything you need from me, please call, text, email. Most of you, if not all of you, have my phone. If you don't, just ask and I'll get it to you. So let you know what we do as the Association of Counties. Every Friday at 3:30, I think it's going to be, or 3 or 3:30, we'll be following everything you're up to in terms of legislative bills, and we'll try to track you on an ongoing basis, not in a negative way, but just in a hopefully responsive way where something comes up, we know what you're up to, and we'll try to offer input as we can. But please do not forget that we are here, we are available, and if you have questions, concerns, either direction, please contact us directly and let us know. And if we can inform you and answer some questions, that would be outstanding. So again, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your time in the next 4 months. And if there's anything you need, let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Chad. Mayor Bertie Dardis.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Mayor Mahoney for hosting us this morning. Commissioner Peterson, it's always a pleasure to share the dais with you and talk about the needs of Cass County and our municipalities. Again, to all of the legislators that are online, I'd like to thank you for your time today. And again, stress to you how much I respect what you have to do in the upcoming session. Part of my presentation today, when I went through the specifics of sewer and water and our 10-year plan of what the expenses were, was to try and impress upon you that the men that are here with me today, Mr. Peterson, Mayor Mahoney, and myself, our decision-making and our budgeting process is a different scale of what you do, but it is as difficult as the work that you have to do. We have as many needs as all of the taxpayers in the state of North Dakota that you're addressing. And so this is just a snapshot of what the municipalities and what the counties have to do. It's equally hard work to what you do. So if you have any questions of myself or our staff of the city of West Fargo, my fellow commissioners, we welcome those. We want to work with you. We want you to understand the issues that we deal with, because the issues that you deal with are much more public and out front in the media and the like. So again, out of absolute respect for what you have to do in the upcoming session, we understand that, and we're just willing to be working partners with you. And we wanted to share with you a little bit today of some of the issues that municipalities deal with. So again, thank you so very much for your time. Merry Christmas to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Dardis. I noticed a couple of my commissioners online today watching this as well. One of the concerns the commissioners have is business recovery. So we know as you go into the session, we're not quite sure how our businesses are going to recover with the COVID issues that we have that could send forth. So I would ask you to pay some attention to that. Our unemployment rate is down to 3%, but yet we had 2,000 workers in the industry, hospitality industry displaced because of the COVID. And we're just very concerned about getting recovery of our business community in the community. So I wish you well on tackling the different problems that you're going to have. Again, very much appreciate the fact that all of you take time and serve for the communities. We very much appreciate that. We are always, and my team is always ready to stand by and give you any data or information you might need in order to fulfill your job out in Bismarck. But again, thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for the support you give us in our community. Happy holidays as well, Merry Christmas, and hope all goes well. Thank you.